You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. Episode 33, Liftoff. I'm Bruce Philp, and thank you for listening. Well, have you ever wondered what it would be like to relive the rush of your first season, when it all seemed like a miracle and every second in the saddle was magic? In a moment, you're going to meet someone whose motorcycle journey is so new he doesn't even have a bike yet. Well, if you're like me, this conversation is going to bring those days rushing back, and you might just be reassured that, as with all kinds of love, the truest feelings just don't change. We'll get to his story in a moment, but first let's take care of the usual business. Thank you, as always, for the amazing emails and a couple of new reviews of the podcast over the last few weeks. After my conversation with Kusala Bhikshu, I got quite a few very complimentary notes, and I always appreciate those. But this time was a bit special. I've always felt a bit uncertain about the philosophical rabbit holes that this podcast can sometimes wander into. Thinking about motorcycling that way is part of my experience, but I'm never quite sure how many other riders experience it the same way, so my fingers are crossed every time I drop an episode. Well, if any episode was going to put this to the test, it would be this one, and your response was very encouraging. If we can enjoy a conversation with a motorcycle riding Buddhist monk together, well, then I guess we're doing just fine. So thank you for that. I want to say hi to one email writer as a sort of dedication for this episode, a listener named Austin. This was the year that Austin was going to buy his first motorcycle, a dream that has been deferred by the pandemic and by the recent loss of his dad. Austin, this one's for you. There are brighter roads ahead. And finally, heartfelt thanks for the flurry of donations to this podcast's Movember page over the last few weeks. Megan, Frode, Nicholas, Ashoka, Mike, Ewan, Kyler, Steve, and Terry. I know it's a difficult time of year to ask for money or to spend it, so I'm really amazed and grateful to see these alerts coming in from Movember. And I know the people who need this help will be too. If you'd like to contribute, look for the mustache in my show notes or my bi-weekly newsletter and follow the link. I'm so happy to see this finally starting to get some momentum. Okay, here we go. So, my clever wife devised this thought experiment a while back that she thinks we should use to take stock of our lives, and it goes like this. Imagine there's a knock at the door. You open it, and standing there is 6-year-old you. And he or she has traveled through time to see what you've done with your life. But remember the catch here. You're being graded by a 6-year-old. So they're not concerned with the size of your retirement savings account or the title on your business card or who you voted for in the last election. No, they're going to grade you on things like whether you have a lot of friends and whether you have awesome toys and get to play with them, whether you're a good person or a bad one, and maybe whether or not you might actually, finally, be cool. Well, as thought experiments go, it's a way of making sure you're staying true to yourself, but it's also a way of making sure you appreciate everything you are and everything you have. It's in this spirit that I have long wanted to do an interview with someone who's just beginning their life as a motorcyclist. I've had the good fortune to interview riders who have done some astonishing things, and even people who've made history, in a few cases. It's easy for me, and maybe for you, to forget that it's an enormous act of faith and courage just to throw a leg over a motorcycle for the first time. Well, I thought it might be fun to remind ourselves of that, to get back in touch with that earlier goofball version of ourselves that recklessly decided to give this a try. All I needed was the right volunteer. The solution landed in my inbox earlier this fall in the form of an email entitled, Starting My Journey. The writer, a listener named Neale Koumbiadis, was, the very next day, about to take his M1 exit course. And for American listeners, that's roughly the equivalent of the MSF. I'm not sure why I'm emailing you, he wrote. I have just had this desire to ride burning at me for a couple of years, and I felt it was something I needed to do. Well, his email ran to 5 paragraphs, and you could feel the excitement in every word. His first ride a few weeks earlier had been around a parking lot on a borrowed Suzuki Savage, an experience he described, and I'm quoting here, as the most liberating thing I have ever done. End quote. In a parking lot, which is saying something because it turned out that Neale flies airplanes. P.S. he said, I'm 41 years old. I don't think it's ever too late to try something new. Well, I thought we just had to meet him. I found Neale Koumbiadis locked down at his home in Milton, Ontario. Good morning, Neale. How are you doing?
Doing great, Bruce. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm actually really excited to talk to you, and I know you're having a busy time professionally, so I'm especially grateful that you said yes and made the time for me. Are you in the middle of all this? Are you losing your mind not being able to ride right now?
You know, it's amazing the relief or the release you can get from online forums and books and podcasts and all that. But I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. You know, I'm so new to the game here overall that I'm not feeling the itch as bad as I'm sure some people are at this point. But I can't wait for late March, April to come. That's for sure.
Yeah, I smiled as you talked about online forums and magazines because I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later. That is a key survival tactic. So look, first of all, congratulations again on getting your license, which we'll talk a bit about shortly. But I actually wanted to start with your original email to me, which caught my eye and is the reason why we're speaking. And the subject of that email was starting my journey. And when you wrote it to me, you said you weren't really sure why you were reaching out to this, random podcaster. And I wonder if you've reflected on that at all. What made you want to connect with somebody, like me at that moment in your journey?
I have reflected back on it. The only thing that really kind of repeats and comes back to mind is the whole thought of excitement, feeling really excited is the only word I can really say about getting started and trying this whole thing out, seeing what, motorcycling, the whole life of motorcycling was really all about. And I really enjoyed the podcast that you had posted and, kind of felt a connection early on because of some of the guests that you would have, the conversations that you had and the passion that was spoken about by a lot of people, and said, if I'm going to share this with somebody, this guy seems like, the right person to do it with, who doesn't know me, who doesn't know my past, doesn't know my history or anything like that, and kind of see what their thoughts are. They can tell me I'm crazy or welcome. It'll be interesting to hear what they say.
Right. Yeah, I think probably, that moment, you wrote me sort of the night before you were doing your M1 exit course, which, I'll explain to listeners at another point, is part of our graduated licensing system. But that's a big, intense weekend. You're kind of, it's a Friday night and 2 days, and it ends with a test. And certainly at the beginning of your career as a rider, it is pretty exciting. And it was literally on the eve of that experience that you said hi to me. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And in that email, you said that the desire to do this had been, the word you used was burning in you for a couple of years. And that made me smile too, because it felt pretty familiar. And I imagine it will to lots of people listening to this. But I'm just curious to know, take me through the process of deciding to ride, all the way from the very first inkling. What lit the fire? If you like, what was your journey to the beginning, if I can put it like that?
Yeah, so going back a couple of years now, so there's a part to the beginning of the journey that you're not aware of, and I'll fill you in on that right now. But basically, professionally throughout my career, I've never really enjoyed golfing or doing anything like that. And as I was progressing through the ranks within my employer right now, the person that I was reporting to, my big boss, who was based out of the States, was always an avid motorcyclist, Harley rider from Vermont, and really enjoyed traveling on his bike. So always spoke quite highly of his, with so much passion about his journeys that he was going on and the trips that he would do. And that he would also, in turn, make those trips with a lot of coworkers and with his customers, his clients that he had built relationships over the years with. So when I slowly moved into his position, in speaking with the representatives and the people that would ultimately end up, reporting into me, they would always ask, "Oh, do you have your motorcycle license? Can we go for rides?" And what it turned out is that they would do outings, day trips, cruises, things like that, in place of going golfing. Instead of spending all the money to go and spend 5-6 hours on a golf course or participate in golf tournaments, they would go and ride motorcycles together. And I thought that was, a pretty neat way of bonding with people. And I didn't quite understand it right at the beginning, but the more I got involved with my team and they kept bringing it up, I said, you know what, I really need to try something and give this a go. But I had always had a fear in the back of my head that, well, motorcycling is so dangerous. It's crazy. People that ride bikes are, they're nuts. They're Looney Tunes. So the part of the story that you don't know is that I really took the long way to get to my motorcycle, to the M1, to the M1 exit course and whatnot. And that is that the year before I did the M1 exit, I actually did my 3-wheeled license. I decided, you know what, that's a safer route. I'm going to learn how to ride these 3-wheeled bikes first. And then after I got my 3-wheeled license, my M2M, as they call it here in Canada, or in Ontario at least, I realized you can't rent these things anywhere. There's, with the exception of one province and, a few states in the US, there's really not many places that I could rent them from. So it was kind of a wasted course, but I really did enjoy being close to the ground and riding around with the helmet and the standard motorcycle wave, even though that was really just a parking lot course that I was taking there. And that was kind of the very infant start of it. And then went out to Las Vegas that fall for a trade show. And a bunch of the guys that I was working with were going out for a cruise, and there was nobody there at that point that was renting a 3-wheeled bike. So, my whole attempt to do this, to be able to ride with my coworkers, was kind of for naught, because I just wasn't able to rent a bike that was a 3-wheeled course that wasn't on a tour, a pre-organized tour. So that was kind of how it all got started. And then, of course, I had signed up, thinking about it all winter. Oh, I should have done it the other way. Thinking about it all winter, signing up for courses. And then come February, March, I've already signed up for the first course that I could possibly get into. And they just all got canceled and delayed because of what was going on. So it really compounded my interest and my excitement for really giving this a go on 2 wheels.
Interesting. Although the way you tell the story, it almost sounds like it was initially sort of a peer pressure thing. I think one of the best kept secrets in motorcycling is that there is a large tribe of very senior corporate people who do this as a way of, I guess, not being golfers. So it sounds like maybe that's a little bit what your boss was maybe kind of into. But it feels like somewhere along the line here, it went from being, I need to do this in order to be, part of my, corporate cohort, and it became sort of personal for you. Is that how that went? And do you remember what shifted, or was it just the experience?
It really was, even just on that 3-wheeled course for the weekend that I was doing that, I really got bit by the bug. And then without having ridden a 2-wheeled bike, it's pretty amazing how it really bubbled up inside that I really had to give this a go and give it a try and see what I was missing, because I would talk with my youngest daughter, who's 9, and she would get excited about the thought of it, so much so that she wanted to go and learn how to ride bikes too, and learn how to ride dirt bikes and do all those kinds of things. So I would see the excitement and the passion in her eyes about just the thought of it. And it, I guess, brought out the kid in me and said, okay, this is really something I want to try. I mean, if she's that excited about it, I'm not that old. I got to give this a go as well. And sure enough, one thing led to another.
I smiled when you mentioned your daughter, because I did find the video online that you posted about them discovering that they were going to Disney World. And I thought to myself, your kids are actually pretty good at being excited. That must have been quite a motivator. And indeed, you described this in your note to me. You described this as a need. That's the word you used by the time you were about to head out and take your course. And you made a point of saying that it felt like it really wasn't even a matter of choice for you. And that struck me as strong language. I'm and passionate language, which of course is familiar. But I wonder if you could talk a bit about that. Was there something going on in your life that made it a need, or did it just, to use the word you used a minute ago, did it just sort of erupt?
Well, I'm always one for adventure. I mean, I love adventure. I love traveling. I love seeing things and going out and, experiencing the world and experiencing new things. And I think really the strong desire to give it a go was the passion of the overall industry that I've seen, again, and listening to podcasts and watching videos and talking with coworkers, the way they would describe it. It's like they would describe it to them about how they felt about it. And it felt like there was this hole that was missing within me at that point that, this is something that I really need to, if I don't do this, I'd be foolish because you only live once, you only get to experience things once in life. So give it a go. It just kept, building up and building up. And then I think it was also, getting the term of the desired and absolute need. I think it's because it kept getting delayed because of everything that's been going on this year with, the pandemic and all that stuff, getting delayed. It just, it was like stoking the fire, like, wow, why is this stopping? What is trying to stop me from doing this? Nothing's going to stop me from doing this. I need to do this. I want to do this. I can't wait to do this. And, to pinpoint one exact reason or cause to it, I really can't. I think it's just a combination of a lot. My love for travel and adventure and spontaneity, it all just built up together to kind of culminate in this experience.
Right. Yep. Again, I think probably there's going to be some people nodding their heads at that. But so here's the thing. I think maybe the main reason I thought this guy will be interesting to talk to as a new writer, because it turns out that you're a pilot and you have your commercial rating, if I'm using the right terminology, and that struck me as interesting because you said that after you'd written your M1, some friends let you ride around a parking lot on one of their bikes, which I think was a Suzuki Savage. And you said in your note to me, and I'm quoting here, that it was the most liberating thing you'd ever done. And you said that you were shocked by that feeling. And so as someone who flies airplanes, I feel like the bar might be kind of high for feeling liberated. And so I'm just curious to know, can you take us back to that lap of the parking lot? And what was I appreciate, I'm going to ask you a lot today, kind of how you felt. And those are the hardest questions to answer. And I appreciate that. And I love that you're game to try. And this is going to be one of those moments. Can you take us back to that lap of the parking lot? How exactly did that feel?
So before even the lap of the parking lot, I'll tell you the first time that I flew an airplane, I mean, being with an instructor was one thing, but then, in doing your pilot licenses and going through the whole step, other than your first experience with your instructor, the second big step is what's called your solo flight. And it's the first time the instructor gets out of the airplane and says, all right, go for a lap around the circuit, take off, go, make a few left turns, land, and pat you on the back. You've flown a plane by yourself. So that experience there was the closest thing that I could express the feeling of that ride around the parking lot, simply because when I took off that first time and the ground literally falls away from under you and you take off, you get this, I mean, obviously lifted feeling. You're up, you're one with the birds, and you're in the air. You're in complete control of your own destiny. And then you get up into the pattern, you fly around, you come in and land. I thought that was the most exhilarating thing ever until I got onto the flying much more regularly. And in aviation, if you have any commercial pilots that listen here, they know that, I mean, essentially once you've learned how to fly and you've done, unless you're an aerobatics pilot, every day is really ultimately is the same thing. You take off, you go to you get to cruise altitude, you fly over everything from a bird's eye view, you see the world, sure, and you get to your destination and do the same procedure in reverse. You go in and you land and on to the next day, and you hope that nothing, no emergencies or urgencies happen, and you go about your business. But getting onto the bike in the parking lot was a completely different sensation in the sense that you never left the ground. There was always somebody else around. There was always a pylon that was there. There was always a car in the parking lot. Your level of awareness, I found my level of awareness at least had to be so much more heightened doing that. And in heightening that level of awareness, it also allowed me to bring in a lot more senses. So the smells, the wind, the kind of the rumble of the bike, the feeling that your hands are starting to get tired on the throttle or the clutch, all the different steps that go into it. There was no real routine to it, and you're close to the ground, and you have a much more of a sensation of speed, as much of what as you can get by going 20 kilometers an hour in a parking lot at that point. But you feel like you're going warp speed, and it was the wind in your hair and in your eyes. It was really quite amazing to me, and it's a feeling that you don't quite get from sitting behind an airplane. You could be going 500 miles an hour, you could be going 120 miles an hour, and really the sensation is the same, where it's not quite that way on the bike. When I went from 20 to 30, I felt the difference. I felt more wind against, I felt more resistance. I felt a little less vibration in the bike, and the same thing coming into stop is turning, everything. It was just a completely different experience of the senses.
Yeah, that's well put. And I wondered, just kind of as an aside, the bike you were on, that Suzuki S40, or the Savage as it's been known for most of its life, that was actually also my first bike. And I remember that it was super loud and super shaky and vibey and lots of mechanical stuff going on under you. You could not possibly forget for a minute that you were on a bike. And I wondered if that was in your memory, if that was a factor in your experience at all, or were you just caught up in the miracle of motion? Because I know that the discovery that those gyroscopes work is magic all by itself, but I wondered whether the intensity, if you like, of that particular bike is part of that memory for you.
The intensity of the bike was certainly a memory. The sound of it was definitely overwhelming and pretty impressive. I had a full face helmet on, so I'm sure it wasn't as loud as it could have been. But for me, there was more of a fear, because the clutch on that particular bike there wasn't really well, I guess, set up, or however you want to call it. So, the amount of times that I drove manual transmission cars all my life, but the amount of times that I stalled that thing getting going and learning about counter steering and stopping with the wheel turned a little bit, just all those different pieces, how I had to constantly be on that thing and thinking, well, I'm about to stall this thing again, or rolling out of the stop sign, was definitely, it definitely kept me on my toes and made me realize that, wow, there's a lot of learning to go on here. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't end. It doesn't end in the parking lot. I mentioned earlier that you said you'd been shocked by the feeling, and I think you touched a little bit on this. But the quote in your note was that maybe it's because I'm still connected to the ground. It's. I think you said a minute ago that it had a lot to do with this sort of feeling of presence and things being, kind of nearby. Can you talk a little more about that? Imagine that there's someone listening to this who hasn't ridden a bike yet. That feeling of being connected to the ground, it does what for you?
It really, the biggest thing about being the connection to the ground goes back to the feeling of speed and movement. And again, the only thing I have to compare it to was, in my adventures, was in flying, where you only time you feel the speed is while your wheels are on the ground. And that is some of the funnest. That's probably the most fun about flying is the run up to your takeoff, because you see the trees starting to pass you quicker. You see the lights go past, and it never ends on a bike. The faster you go, that you see the ground, you see the tarmac there beneath you, you feel the vibrations, you feel the ripples of the ground, you feel all that stuff, the different types of terrain that you might be going on. You get all of that. So there is a connection, and you're in nature. This is going to sound kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but when you're on the ground, you're below everything. Everything is, the scales is bigger than when you're flying. So I think that's what was really impressive to me, is I'm flying by things on this bike, and the tree is right there, the leaves are right there, the dog and on his walk is right beside you. Everything is so close. And I think that was the biggest thing about the connection. I'm connected with the environment, where I didn't have that in flying. You're connected with the environment just in the sense that you're in the plane and you're looking at everything, but the scale is all different. And again, different from a car. Everybody drives cars around and you feel protected. Now I understand the term when people refer to people in cars as cagers now. I get that. Like, you're in this box, you're driving around, and you're just going about your business. But when you're in a bike and you're not protected by this cage, you don't have the four walls and a roof around you. So again, you're a lot closer to those trees. You're a lot closer to the person beside you going for a run, or the other motorcycle, or the car beside you. You just, everything is much more. You're much more. I found I was a lot more present.
Yeah, that's the word. I mean, that's the the famous Robert Pirsig quote: "Is the sense of presence is overwhelming," and that's really kind of what you're describing there. Yeah, great answer. So here in Ontario, so after that parking lot run, so here in Ontario, getting your M2 license, as I mentioned earlier, involves a commitment of a weekend, which ends in a test, and that experience can be easy or hard. You actually get to watch people fail. They do it whether it's raining or not. And so the memory of that M1 exit course is often pretty vivid for people. How was it for you? How was your weekend? Tell us about that.
It was a great weekend. I was nervous. The what's typically a classroom portion was actually done virtually. It was done online. So everyone hopped onto Zoom, and you saw the instructors basically there. So we lost a bit of that connection with the rest of the, let's call them classmates or students or attendees, however you want to refer to it. So we missed that part of it. But then going on the weekend, showing up at 7:00 a.m. and, seeing all these bikes lined up, you see the bikes lined up that we're going to be riding on. Then you see the bikes lined up that the instructor showed up on. You're like, holy cow, what a what a difference in scale here. It was quite something. Not having been to too many motorcycle dealerships, you think a bike's a bike, and then you pull up beside somebody on a 790 KTM or something adventure bike, which looks like a giraffe beside this little TW 200 that I was riding on. It was pretty amazing at that point. It was pretty cool. But the whole group was really, I found, in the same situation. They were everyone was a little bit overwhelmed. Everyone was excited. Everyone was nervous. I was fortunate that the weather was absolutely beautiful that weekend. It was, not a speck of rain, nothing at all. The sun was shining, and, it wasn't so hot that we had to constantly dehydrating. So it was, I really enjoyed getting to know people, and everybody. It was a very easy way to get to know people, because you'd right away start just chatting with people. What brings you here? What's your background? What's your background in terms of riding? What's your history? And I was surprised at the amount of people that actually were already licensed, but from other countries, or had gone through the whole process before and never finished off the graduated licensing, let their licenses expired and had to go back to it. So I would say probably 50% of the people in that class were let's call them returning students, just doing it again. Another 5 or so percent of people that were there had failed the class before and said, rather than just redoing the test, I want to redo the course. And then the rest of them were like me, complete, newbies, just giving it a go for the first time. But the common theme was everyone was super kind and outgoing, really excited to be there and really wanting to have that experience and learn.
That's nice to hear, and that was kind of my experience too. Although the composition of the class that I was in was a bit different, but it did feel. I can tell you, from the vantage point of a number of years later, that it does end up being a reasonable proxy for how the motorcycle community works. That sense of everybody being leveled out and relatively nurturing. I mean, with exceptions, that really kind of is the world you've just entered. So just still on the course for a second. Do you remember what the toughest exercise was for you?
The figure eights, for whatever reason, it was those darn figure eights. The clutch control going around that figure eight. I would do it, but it was a pretty big figure eight. It was, I don't know, looked more like a two-balled snowman more than a figure eight, that's for sure.
That's funny. Well, you picked a good bike. I'll say that. There are people, present company included, that tend to kind of vote their fantasies when offered a choice at that moment, and I think you chose well. I'm still bitter from the experience myself. So it's the end of September. You've passed your M2, and that license level is fairly unrestricted, but it doesn't include a road test. It's just a range test, even though it does make you road legal. And yet, I don't know, I'm counting maybe 3 weeks later, you were riding with friends in Alberta. And that sounded to me like a pretty big bite to take. And did you feel ready? And if you did feel ready, tell me why.
I didn't feel particularly ready. I felt more ready in my mind than I did when I actually got onto the bike to go for a ride. And what I didn't feel ready about was all the other vehicles to be around me. The little bit of the extra pressure that you feel, you're at the light and, you can go install all you want to in a parking lot or make a mistake or turn the wrong way or not signal, because you don't typically learn how to use your turn signals in the, in the parking lot course. They tell you should use your signal at this point, but nobody does it. So adding that step to it, all the extra factors that were there, I didn't feel all that ready for it. But what I knew though is that the colleague that I was going to be riding with was very patient. It was the same one that had me putting around in the parking lot, and I knew how patient he was. So we didn't go right away onto the highway or anything. We took kind of a back road to get to let's call it our jumping off point. So I slowly got into it that way. But yeah, to kind of answer the question, I didn't feel ready at all for it. But I also don't feel that it was a big jump, because the mentor, the colleague that I had to take me along, kind of take me under his wing for that ride was so helpful. I didn't feel pressured at all. I could kind of do it at my own pace and be as comfortable as I needed to.
Right. That makes a big difference, I think, as long as you're also, I guess, choosing the roads well. I think a lot of riders remember that first open road ride in, kind of high def detail. I remember mine, and I practically wanted to scream. I was so kind of pumped to be doing it. Was it like that for you? Tell me how it first felt when the kickstand went up and you were really out there, not in a parking lot, but on a real road and on a real motorcycle, and as you put it earlier, in control of your destiny.
Yeah, it was kind of as the road kind of moved on, as we kind of moved on the road, it's the fears and everything kind of went away as the city streets and everything seemed to kind of go away, to the degree that, the more that I twisted on the throttle, it was like, okay, I'm leaving that baggage behind me and off we go. And I felt really nervous at the beginning. And then as the traffic kind of subsided, where I kind of concentrated more on the steps of what I was doing, it felt very relaxing. It felt like there was a big release, and it was just like, okay, like let go, like a big breath out and off we go here. The scenery though that I had, I was so fortunate. I was in Alberta. So the scenery that I had was just to die for. It was, we're out in the western part of Calgary, basically in a town called Cochrane, heading into another town, which, took us down some roads. So leaving the city behind and hopping onto that road was great. And as the speed limits, slowly picked up as we moved farther and farther out of town. And I mean, I maybe hit 3 digits a couple of times, hit the 100 kilometer an hour mark. And then, but don't even really realize it anymore at that point, because I was so in the moment of what was really going on. Mm-hmm. And the nerves disappeared, everything went away, until we pulled into the next small town and realized, okay, got to really, really focus in here again on the stuff that I'm not so comfortable with. And then again, we left town and the same exhilarating feeling as we left.
I have to think, I mean, I've never ridden out there. I've driven the main roads out there, but my sense is that, as you say, the scenery is gorgeous, but the roads aren't technically super challenging. So it seems to me it would be like an awesome place to kind of lose your virginity, so to speak. Looking back on it, do you think that's true? Would you recommend that as a place to kind of dive in?
Hands down. And people that live out there have such an advantage, I think, over us here in kind of, in the Ontario area, kind of where I am, down near the city of Toronto. You can ride around on country roads and go up and down and do all of that. But riding out there where you have 90 plus kilometer speed limit roads that are beautifully paved, that are not zigzag, twisty, switchback type roads, that are more easy bending roads with lakes and rivers and mountains and free range cattle right on the side of the road. You can't beat it, because you have the space, you have well-paved roads so that you can get comfortable. You have small little towns, so you're not overwhelmed by traffic. And again, you have the sun above you, and you're, in the road beneath you. So what more could you ask for? Yeah.
And what were you riding? It was a cruiser, as I recall.
It was a Yamaha 650.
Oh, nice. And that's
like a V-Star or something like that.
It's a twin, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so the trip was great.
It was amazing. It was great. That first trip was great. We probably put on, oh man, 60 some miles on that first trip, 100 and change kilometers on that first out and back, just to kind of get me involved in going down to a small town. And it was unbelievable. It was great.
Yeah.
And that was day 1 of 2.
Yeah, so you wrote me again after you got back from that trip, and I was just so happy that you had a great time, and it did. There will come a time when 60 miles seems like an easy day, but boy, it just seems like you're going to the moon when you start, and it sounded like you had a great beginning, and a bit. There was no sense in your note of fear, but I think it's probably worth talking a bit about danger, in the context of you being a new rider, at least. So we talked about you being a commercial pilot. So statistically speaking, you spend some time in the same risk tier as a motorcyclist does, depending on whose data you're looking at. But I wonder, do you experience motorcycling as a risky activity? And can you contrast that a little bit with flying?
I definitely feel it to be a more risky activity than flying itself, and that's again because of the exposed nature of it, right? I can trust all day long that I'm going to always do the right things, make the right steps, but the fear we all have is that somebody else isn't going to do the right thing and they're going to jump out in front of you, and you're extremely vulnerable. So there is that fear, but at least on in the early stages for me in motorcycling, that fear definitely kept me aware. It kept me sharp, kept my head on a pivot type of idea, looking around constantly. So I was definitely scared. Where aviation, if something's going to happen on a motorcycle, it's going to happen probably very quickly. In aviation, when flying a plane, if something happens, people think the worst thing that can happen to you is your engine shuts off. And now what do you do? Well, if it's daytime and your engine shuts off, it's not really that big of a deal because you spend most of your time training in that sense. And that you can glide down to the ground, and all those different things all those different safeties that airplanes have to be able to get you back to the ground safe and sound are great. I mean, it's all there. You don't have quite that buffer on a bike.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I had a bunch of questions kind of lined up to talk about this theme because people, you'll find on internet forums, for example, that the topic sometimes comes up comparing the two things, and motorcyclists will sometimes a bit defensively will say, well, no, riding a motorcycle is actually in some regards more difficult and dangerous because everything is so immediate. Instead of the nearest obstacle being a kilometer away, it might be 3 feet away, and doing the same speed you are and coming right at you. Have you formed, maybe you've just answered this question, but I wonder whether, having had the experience you've had so far on a bike, you feel somehow more heroic. That's probably not the right word, but it's somewhere in that pocket. Does this feel like a bigger accomplishment, a bigger expression of courage in some way?
I would say I wouldn't call it more of an accomplishment. I would definitely call it though more of a. I really don't know how to answer that. I would say not an accomplishment. There's more of a sense of fear, and I think every time I got the few times that I've ridden, every time I've gotten back to the parking lot or the garage to put the bike away, I feel more satisfied, I think, than I did anytime I've gotten off the plane, with the exception of a few trips on a plane that I've done, some really long distance flights to completely brand new destinations. I definitely have that sense more often on the bike, that as soon as I park it, like, whew, really, escape death today again. Check that one off. Made it through it again. Just because, again, I can control only what I can control. And if somebody else decides they want to jump out and sideswipe me on the bike, then there's nothing I can do. Really, nothing I can do to control it, even if I take all the necessary precautions. It's very different from aviation, where I know that the plane is well inspected. I know that there's a lot more safeguards in place in terms of people are looking out for me in the plane, keeping traffic spread out and everything like that. So definitely more satisfying when I get back on the bike. And now some pilots will probably want to wring my neck for making that comment, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I could kind of geek out on that subject, but I will, out of respect for my listeners, not do that. I'm wondering, just staying on that theme for a bit. I think I sent you a video last night that I thought you might enjoy about someone's kind of meditating about why they ride, and they made the point in the script of this video that I think he said something like thinking about the past can make you depressed, and thinking about the future can make you anxious, but in the present you're at peace. And I wonder, does that resonate for you? And have you got there yet? Because I think there is a point as a rider when you do, but I'm not sure you do right away. When you're out there, kind of super present and overwhelmed by the reality of the situation, do you feel peaceful?
I certainly did feel peaceful. Again, the few times that I've ridden now, it was an overwhelmingly peaceful experience, but not, I won't call it meditative, because I think meditative takes you out of what's really happening immediately around me. Certainly it was extremely peaceful in keeping me present, keeping me focused on what's going on right now, not worrying about, the fact that I didn't pick up enough groceries, or the fact that I have this huge project due at work in a week from now. It kept me, I'm riding this bike right now. I'm enjoying seeing the scenery and the coworker that I'm with, and having the experience. And I think it was really interesting watching that video yesterday that you sent me, and I appreciate you doing that. It's kind of been my mindset as of late, and thinking, again, with the way things are going on right now in the world, not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, why not just, live now and have fun and have the experiences, always conscious of the future, and, not going and blowing my bank and buying 15 new motorcycles that I would love to go and do, because I don't know what I want to ride next. But, enjoying all the experiences that I'm having right now, and I think it brought me in more of a realization, really enjoy my kids, enjoy my wife, enjoy working, and everything. It all it comes in. And I almost felt sobby after the first ride. Like, wow, this was so relaxing and so peaceful and so exhilarating all at the same time, that, I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I think a few thousand people are nodding right now. You mentioned your wife. Now, I think you said at one point in our correspondence that she wasn't super enthusiastic about all this. What's that about, do you think? And how has that been? And have things changed in the last couple of months?
Definitely hasn't changed. Not on board with the idea at all. Still, she's very uncomfortable with it. Love her to pieces. She's, pretty conservative with stuff like that. She says, there's only so many risks I can handle you doing, and knowing that I'm a pilot. So it's, without ever saying so, she would, I feel that in the back of her head, she's like, you either got to give up flying or give up riding, kind of take your pick. So she's not on board with it really at all. So for me, it's kind of my way to get away and do things. And, I don't have any visions of her hopping on the back of the bike and going for a ride with me, unfortunately, as much as I can try to persuade her. But, she has her adventures that she likes to do. And, this is one that that'll be mine. And really at the end of the day, it'll be me and my daughters at the end, because I took her for a dirt bike lesson. She loved it. So we plan on riding the dirt a whole bunch together next summer. Can't wait to do it. But she's not a fan, that's for sure. And it's unfortunate. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a common issue, obviously, parents and spouses and sometimes friends. But I wonder if you see a path to reconciliation. Can you imagine how this could change? Can you speculate, about what it might look like for her someday to understand you enough that, or that's not the right way to put it at all, to understand this enough that she, feels better about the whole thing?
I meat, I would love nothing more than for her to, at the very least, take the course, take the intro course or the M1 exit course, and have that at least have that experience and see kind of what they teach you and how everything goes. That would be fun. That might be kind of stretching at the beginning. I think the transition is going to come slowly for her, as if my daughter continues to enjoy it and wants to do more of it and perhaps try some different experiences as she gets closer to, again, she's young right now, but as she gets closer to her to licensable age, where her and I could maybe, hop on some adventure bikes and go for a ride on a forest road or something like that. Maybe then she'll see, okay, this isn't so bad. They've been doing it for a bunch of years. I'm pretty comfortable with them overall doing this. Maybe it's not as bad as I've made it out to be in my head. I think so. I think it'll be a slow burn.
Yeah. Yeah. And just maybe enough time going by without anything dramatic happening. And so you talked about riding in the dirt with your daughter. Have you done a bunch of dirt riding yet? Has that become part of your diet, or are you just looking forward to trying it?
Yeah, I haven't yet. I'm looking forward to it next year. I mean, I was trying to get signed up for a place to go and take a lesson with one of the instructors there. I didn't need to take the lesson because I have my M2, so I didn't technically need to, but I wanted to, just to get a comfort on that type of a bike. So that's definitely, I'm going to get myself signed up pretty quickly as soon as I'm able to for the early spring to go to this place that she did hers, and I'll take the course. I'll take it with another friend of mine that wants to give it a try. And then once that's done, we plan at least every month. She said she wants to go between 10 and 20 times next year on the dirt. So we'll be putting some hours under on our seats next year. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, there are people who feel very strongly that that's a great way to learn, to ride anything. So I'll be curious to see how that goes for you. I have not made that leap yet. Just back to the subject of your family a little bit. I wonder if you have a strategy for kind of converting them. I mean, obviously your daughter, just kind of got it instantly. But is there something you do or something you say, routinely that you hope over time, will convert them? Are you consciously, engaged in a process of persuasion here, or is it just not talked about?
It's really not talked about that much. I don't have really a written out strategy. What I do is, I have an ATV, so I'll take my kids out riding on that, as often as possible, and they really enjoy that. So part of the strategy, hopefully she's not listening to this, I guess overall would be, if I pester her enough with the riding on dirt bikes and riding on our ATV and taking the kids out and trying that the backdoor approach, getting the kids to say, "Oh, it'd be so much fun, Mom, if you rode bikes too. Look how much fun we're having." I guess that's kind of the subconscious strategy that I'm working right now. We'll see how that goes.
The FOMO strategy. Yeah, that's a good one. So I'm wondering now, so it's early days. You've been licensed for like 2.5 months, I guess, something like that. Can you imagine yourself now as someone who doesn't ride, or has it already got its hooks into you that deeply?
I think it's got its hooks into me pretty deep, because I was thinking about it, and I think about, we've talked about a couple different types of bikes, dirt bikes and cruisers, and I mentioned adventure bikes. There's so many types of bikes out there to experience that I don't know how I could possibly get bored of it, especially, again, not right now, not owning a bike, but knowing a lot of people that do, traveling as much as I do for work, going and visiting, again, my coworkers and whatnot, because I'll be riding with them. I'll be renting bikes constantly. So I think that because I'll be giving myself that much of a variety in terms of scenery, types of bikes, and all those different experiences, I can't imagine how it would ever let me go. There's just so much to experience. There's so much to experience. Yeah. And it's not just an A to B, go from point A to point B type of thing. It's hopping on a single versus a twin versus a triple, parallel twin, all the different types that are out there. I mean, I don't even know the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
So it's an experience. It'll be an overall experience and a learning. And that's what's so exciting about the whole thing. So the long answer to that is no, I don't see it letting me go anytime soon. The hooks are definitely in pretty deep.
Right. And you don't own a bike yet, is that right?
I do not own a bike, no.
So is you renting, borrowing? How are you getting your seat time?
Yeah, so right now it's been, hopefully when I'm able to start traveling again quite a bit more, riding with my colleagues anytime I get to various cities. I end up in Las Vegas quite a bit for work, again, for trade shows and whatnot. So a few of the places there have all kinds of different models that you can get your hands on. Every state that I go to has different models of bikes that I can get my hands on and ride there. The only place that I can't ride too much is close to home is here, because there aren't a lot of places that will rent them. Harley requires a full M license to rent one of their bikes, and there are very few places to go. So I need to make a bigger circle of motorcycle friends close to home that aren't just dirt bike riders, so I can go and experience more things. Yeah, and I have a desire to own a bike, but I have no idea what I would want to buy, because there's so many different things out there. I wouldn't want to just go and spend my money on one bike thinking that's what I want to ride full time every day. I just think that there's so many different types and things to try and be the experience if I own something and made myself want to ride that every day. I think I want to take it all in. I want to try the track. I want to try the adventure stuff. I want to try everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to get away without wasting money. I think that's just part of the deal. But good for you for trying. You trust me on this. So after you passed your M2, you wrote back to me to say that you felt, and I'm quoting you here, officially part of the brotherhood now. And I wonder what that word means to you. What does joining this thing mean to you exactly, and why did you choose those words?
Camaraderie, really. I mean, part of the experience when I was riding out west was the motorcycle wave that goes on you go by people, and I would say 95% of the people that we cross go in opposite direction, give a little wave and a nod. And that felt like a very welcoming gesture. I mean, they have no idea if I've been riding for an hour or riding for, 30 years. They have no clue, but it was a very welcoming gesture all the time. And even now when I'm driving around in my truck, going around, if I see a motorcycle on the side of the road parked for whatever reason, just on their phone, now I'm stopping quickly and I'm asking them, "Oh, everything good? Are you okay?" And I just feel like everyone's there. They're all there. Everybody on a bike is there to help out the other person. And that really popped out to me actually when I was riding out west. My colleague on his bike that he was riding, his 900 something bike, I don't know what it was, a guy pulled up behind us and hopped out of his truck and ran up to him pretty quickly and said, "Your exhaust is," said to him, "your exhaust is burning red." And he had felt that his bike wasn't running smooth. So the fact that person hopped out and addressed what he thought was an issue was pretty amazing. Turned out there was probably an old mouse nest or something that was stuck in his exhaust. He hadn't ridden in a few weeks, and it ended up burning out, and it was fine. But then as that truck drove away, he had a Harley sticker on the back of his truck. I'm like, oh, okay, right. The guy's a rider, and that's why he was concerned and looking out. Nobody else had stopped to help us out. And that was really why I ended up using that term. And I'd heard the term tossed around a bit, and I thought it was kind of loose, but having that experience that quickly with all of that, it really cemented it that it really is. Everyone on a bike is, for the most part, I won't say everyone, because there's always the outliers to it, but for the most part, people on the bikes are there to help out other people on bikes and help out people in general. And that's why I use the terminology. Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And I guess sort of chasing that theme a little bit further, you're a pilot, and when people become pilots, they say, "I'm a pilot." There's a noun, as opposed to saying, "I fly planes" or "I do piloting." I think there are a lot of motorcyclists who maybe a little more subtly view themselves in that same kind of identity-driven way. So in other words, it isn't just a thing I do like playing golf or water skiing, but it's actually part of who I am. And I'm wondering if you feel so far changed by this in that way, or if you think you will be. Do you imagine at some point, now or in the future, that Neale is a biker? I don't see it right now. I definitely can see how people would have that identification to themselves in that way. I don't personally have that sensation yet. I think, I'm a guy that can ride a bike, and maybe if I own a bike at some point, or, become so infatuated with a particular brand, and, I'll be a Harley rider or an Indian rider or whatever it is. But at this point, no, I don't see that. And I don't redress myself in that way at all. I don't think I have permission to either, because like I said, I don't own own a bike.
Right.
I'm a guy that rides bikes.
Yeah. And that actually, I was just going to ask you that was, how much of that is because you don't feel entitled yet, and how much of that is because you don't think it will ever sort of mean that much? It sounds like it's a bit of both.
Time will tell, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I really don't know. But like I said, I can definitely see why people identify themselves as motorcycle riders, because it really can be a lifestyle when you're planning all of your vacations and trips and outings and groups of friends and everything all around riding. I can definitely see that. For me, very much in aviation, I don't have any aviation friends per se. I mean, I have some people that I know from having done my licenses and whatnot, but yes, I'm a pilot, I guess, because it can be considered a professional designation, but it's not, I'm a guy that flies planes as well. And I own a plane. So it's not like, I just don't have that designation. And maybe it's just a personal thing. Maybe it's just myself. I don't identify myself more as a dad, as a father, as a husband, and more than anything else.
Well, we'll see. I'm quietly placing a bet. Although knowing that you own an airplane gives me some sympathy with your wife. I in the sense that I do think that's a big toy. But just on that subject for a second, when you're riding, is Neale the pilot coming along in some way? Do you have an approach to this that you think you bring with you from aviation?
From a procedural perspective, I would say I do. I mean, with most things that I do in general, I think because of that, you get pounded into your head through flight school about checklists and follow the same routines all the time. So I definitely have that approach every time I'll always walk up to the bike from the kickstand side. I'll always do the exact same steps. I like order in that sense. And that definitely stems from my aviation background, hands down. It doesn't make me a better rider. I don't know. I hope so. I mean, again, for the little bit that I've ridden, I'm still alive. So I guess that's saying something. So my steps must be working for now.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely helped in that way. It's also given me the sense that I don't have to be overwhelmed by the machine, because it's not that they're motorcycles are complex machines, but they're not to the same. I don't have all the factors that I do in aviation coming onto a bike, so it's a little bit simpler.
Right.
So I think if I just hopped onto a bike, maybe I would think it's a little more overwhelming from a procedural perspective than it is. But I just don't have that sensation, because it's much more intricate to fly an airplane than it is to ride a bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's good. And that is part of motorcycle training as well. I think it's one of the ways in which these two worlds, might van a little bit. So acknowledging that you don't necessarily see motorcycling as a part of your core identity yet, I wonder if there's a type of rider that you identify with yet. I know you said you wanted to sort of try everything, and I get that. But, we like to think of motorcycling as a pretty kind of ecumenical community, but it definitely has a tribal side. And I guess I'm wondering whether any of those tribes has attracted you yet, if there's a persona that you feel somehow more naturally attached to yet.
I think that if I had to, I can't pick one, and I've tried, and I can't really pick one, but if I could squish two together, I would say kind of adventure bikes and cruisers are kind of what I think I really will enjoy the most. And that a lot of that comes back to what I enjoy doing personally. And again, I enjoy traveling and touring and going places. So I think cruisers will really be something that, and not necessarily the big Goldwing style cruisers, but cruiser bikes in that sense, to go from a destination, go for 100-mile plus rides, not just puttering around town to get myself from coffee shop to coffee shop. And then adventure bikes, just because I really enjoy ATV riding. I'm, a member of a fishing and hunting camp. So going into that place there on the kind of the forest roads, logging roads that we have to go in there, I would really love to ride a bike in there. So if I could pick two, those would be the ones.
Yeah, which is a very sensible choice, and you'll probably find there are some adventure bikes out there that are brilliant at just eating miles on the highway too. But I wrote this question down on my list, and I thought, well, this is going to sound dumb, but it doesn't. It starts to make sense immediately when you're confronted with the problem of buying gear. And I'm sure all the experienced motorcyclists listening to this will kind of go, "Well, that's silly," and I'm way past that. And that may be true, but the fact is, the first time you have to go and pick a helmet and a jacket and a pair of boots and pants and gloves, you are on some level making a decision about sort of tribal affiliation. Does that ring any bells for you? Have you had that experience standing in a motorcycle shop, or is that still ahead?
No, that's fair. I mean, I had that experience for sure. Primarily with like a jacket and boots more than the helmet. The helmet, I wanted to be sensible and get something that I could use on my ATV on a regular basis, then use on a motorcycle. So, I got a full face helmet with the drop down visor and the internal sun visor. So I kind of knew what I wanted there. I knew I didn't want any loud colors or anything, but then, the thought in the back of my head comes, oh, wow, well, I look silly hopping on the cruiser with a full face helmet. And then my sensible side came back and said, no, it's safer to do it this way. So, the statistics prove that this is a safer helmet to wear. So wear that. Don't be foolish. The jacket, again, I found a jacket that I could wear that was, pretty versatile and whatnot. But the footwear I find is the hardest thing to figure out what to get, because if I'm going to ride a whole bunch of adventure riding, I probably want something with more ankle protection than what I currently have, a little bit taller perhaps. But if I'm out riding on a touring bike or cruising and I'm going to hop off regularly, I'm going to walk into the grocery store, into the coffee shop or to the restaurant or wherever it is, I don't want to be clumping around with ski boot style adventure boots on. So I think I've had a bigger challenge there to figure out my gear. In terms of pants and whatnot, I think pants can be covered up with rain gear if I need to. So, a good pair of padded jeans will probably end up being my go-to style for riding for the time being. There's so many choices out there, though. It's pretty amazing walking into a shop or hopping online and you type down motorcycle pants and 15 subcategories come up. You're like, oh, goodness, now what do I do?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and I think on some level that's fun, but it must be bewildering when you're first starting, because you're being, asked to make decisions, not just about functionality, but, let's be honest, you're making decisions about fashion too, or at the very least, you're trying to avoid it. So yeah, I feel your pain. Just chasing that theme a little bit, I'm wondering if you can talk to me about some of the bikes that have caught your attention. You have spent some time on cruisers and you like that format, but you also mentioned that the 390 Duke had caught your eye, which couldn't be more different. I'm wondering what are you seeing that's sort of standing out for you these days, either because of the use case or just because they're cool.
I think there's definitely a mix. I mean, some bikes that look really cool are also, to me, kind of pretty overwhelming. And then there's the practical side of me that pops in too. I mean, I love the look of like the Indian Scouts and those bikes, no windshield in the front. They're really that styling of bike. I love the styling of the cafe racer type bikes as well. But then the adventure, I find the adventure bikes to be pretty interesting overall. Just like I had mentioned at the 790 or the 1290 look kind of like a giraffe. So I don't know that I would ever end up on something like that. If I was going to pick, again, because I'm kind of all over the place still, like the three bikes, if I was going to go and buy three bikes today, it would probably be an Indian Scout. I would probably hop onto like a naked bike, like an MT-07 to have that sort of feel, and a 790 or a 390 Adventure, probably more like a 390 Adventure, because I don't know that I would ever be able to handle that much power on an adventure bike quite yet. Yeah.
Well, that's probably wise. But I think you may find yourself kind of getting addicted because the power is not necessarily difficult to handle. We'll see. We'll have to stay in touch. Let's put it that way. So did you, I don't mean to, this probably, I'm chuckling. It probably sounds condescending and I totally don't mean it to. It's more that I'm kind of caught up in your enthusiasm and remembering the fun of that process. So were you able to get much riding in after you came home from Alberta? It was a nice fall here, but a little wet in October, I think. How did the year end up?
The the year ended up, unfortunately, not getting too much more saddle time in. Rode a little bit on on a dirt bike, but on just kind of on grass, and you actually get out onto the trail. While my daughter was taking her course, I kind of spun around a little bit on a parking lot, not on the parking lot, but on the big grass lot that was there a little bit, just to, because the bike was there, and I hopped on, and kicking myself that I didn't ride more, go to the next place I could find to rent something and ride and go. It was definitely my intention to be getting out to a couple of different trade shows, getting out there a day early, getting back and leaving a day late, and doing a bunch more riding. But unfortunately, life kind of got in the way, and I wasn't able to do much more after that.
Yeah, I get that. And I was going to ask, and maybe there's just no answer to this. I was going to ask also about where you live. So I know you live in Milton, and around that area, there's lots of nice roads, but there's also a lot of sort of ex-urban commuter traffic and sort of busy multi-lane roads. And I would have found in my first year that kind of riding would have tested my conviction. There's just a lot going on, when you're bumper to bumper at 70 kilometers an hour. Have you had to deal with that yet? And if so, how are you feeling about it?
I had to deal with it, a little bit in town when I was out in Western Canada, but here I used to ride road bikes all the time, like a bicycle, riding all the time. And that was a nice thing about this town. It was so small, so undeveloped. You could hop on your bike, and within a kilometer, half a mile, you're away from really any traffic. Well, that's changed quite drastically right now, where suburban sprawl has really taken over. So I was getting really uncomfortable on my road bike, so much to the point that I ended up selling it and moved on. There are, though, again, on a bicycle or motorcycle, you can get out of town in a relatively short distance. So I'm looking forward to hopping on a motorcycle around here, knowing that I could ride, 5-6 kilometers and be on country roads without much traffic. To get 5-6 kilometers out of town take quite a bit longer on a bicycle. So that's why there's a difference of feeling about the two. But once I'm out of town, I could ride for 12 hours and never have to touch a major highway or really see much traffic, because of all the side roads and back roads that there are. Some beautiful communities all around that to ride on. So I'm not overwhelmed by the city traffic, because if I want to avoid it, I can easily do that.
Right. Good. Yeah, good. Because
same token, though, it's going to be very important to force myself into that quite a bit, so that I can get comfortable with it. I have to learn, again, driving around in a parking lot without any traffic around is going to be one thing, and it'll be important to do every time I hop on a bike before I go out on a ride, is get comfortable with it. But I'm going to have to force myself to drive in city and drive in traffic to get that level of comfort and experience. Because if I don't do it, I'll be terrified of it. So I'd rather do it sooner than later.
Yeah, I think that's wise. And I personally, I live in the country, as you probably know, and I look for those opportunities just so that I don't lose the ability to kind of be calm in those situations. So I think that's a smart strategy. You wrote about being waved at by other riders when you were in Alberta, and you've mentioned it in this conversation too. And you said to me that it felt like they were saying welcome, which which I thought was lovely, and I could imagine exactly how that felt. I wonder if since then you've had much interaction with the local motorcycle community. Obviously COVID is kind of taken a lot of that stuff off the table, but have you had any interaction with riders locally, and how do you feel you've been received?
I have, in the sense that, strictly because I had mentioned that I had seen, a couple, actually happened twice, where there was, motorcycles on the side of the road and they're hopping on your phone, and they're on their phone. And maybe I'm just oversensitive to it because I'm so new to it, but I've had those interactions with riders that I don't know, just kind of checking up on them and them being very appreciative of it. Some of the people that I know that, are quasi riders, let's call them, they similar situation to me. They don't own bikes, but they enjoy riding. I've talked with them about it, and they feel, quite welcoming and excited for me that I've decided to give this a whirl and introduce myself to the experience. It's also definitely helped me connect with some other people that I know that I always knew had bikes, but didn't have a relationship a very close relationship with them. They were kind of friends of friends who now I've become closer to, because I'll start asking them questions and being a lot more conversational about it. So I think it's certainly brought relationships with other people a lot closer, people that I never thought I would be that close with. it's quite something. And, all of a sudden the invitations start coming. Well, okay, well, next summer for sure, we're going to go for a ride somewhere, people that I haven't spent more than 15 minutes with. And they're saying, let's go spend the day together now. Let's go riding, because now we have something that's in common. We have this bond, and let's go experience it all together.
Yeah.
Very welcoming.
It sure is. And also I find, so let me ask you how the experience has been for you. These contacts you've made, are they people like you at a sort of similar stage in life and live in the same kinds of neighborhoods and do the same kinds of things? Or do you find that it's more of a variety of people than you would normally encounter in your life? If that makes sense. Do you have any observations about that?
Well, a couple of the main ones that really pop out are, again, people that I've had interactions with in the past and knew them through friends. The common bond used to be just that, we knew the same person, but now the bond that me and those individuals have are, the fact that I have an interest in something that they have an absolute passion for, and they just come out of their shell excited talking about it. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question there, but it's definitely, it's bonded us in different ways. Some of the other people that I know over time that have been in more of my situation, had gotten their license, did it for a little bit in college and then left it, came back. It's brought back up memories for them. And I think me talking with so much excitement to them about, going through it has brought them to the point of like, oh, I really need to get back into that. I don't know why I let it go. Why, it sounds, you're talking about all the things that I missed and loved about it. I really got to get back into it, because they had, for them, wife, kids, careers, things got in the way and kind of pushed them aside. So now they're really getting excited. So maybe my excitement is rubbing off on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think your age might be even a small factor in all that too, because I think it's very common for riders to turn their backs on it during the years in which they're building a career and raising children, and then they kind of come back later on. But you're still in the middle of that. I think you said you were in your early 40s. That must be kind of inspiring or even challenging for those people. Because as you say, they've chosen to leave it behind, and yet there you are. Is that a theme in your conversations with them?
Yeah, it kind of is, in the sense that they're saying like, the last, kind of what brought me to it. So I'll tell them the situation, like, wow, I really never should have given it up. What's making you do it now at this point? And it has been kind of a theme, and they unfortunately, it's never the intention, but they kind of feel bad for themselves and disappointed themselves that they never kept it up. But I mean, I totally understand how I can easily see how people wouldn't be able to do it or want to do it, because there are those risk factors involved, and you don't want to necessarily, why play poker if you don't have to, type of thing. So, again, I apologize, I'm not answering your question necessarily, but
definitely
they seem excited for the fact that I'm back into it, and maybe, it'll light the fires under their butts and get them going back into it too.
Do you want to have that impact on them?
I want to have that impact. Yeah, I do. I mean, I want to have that impact on people in general about kind of a lot of things. If there's something that you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing, well, you need to do it, because if you don't, what are you waiting for? You're going to turn whatever age down the road, and you're going to have all these regrets that, oh, I should have, could have, would have, didn't do it. At this stage of my life, I'm fortunate. I have the means to be able to have hobbies like this and adventures and whatnot. And why not enjoy them? And, as long as you're fiscally responsible about everything, then what's wrong with having the adventures while you're still very able to?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think every community needs somebody like you to remind them of that. So it's winter now. And you mentioned earlier that you're spending a lot of time reading magazines and prowling around internet forums. And, I've got a friend who's been riding for more than 50 years, and this is still how he gets through the winter, as sort of a compulsive diet of magazines and YouTube videos. So, I hate to break it to you, but this is probably how winter's going to be for you now. Right. So tell me a bit about what you're reading and where you're looking online. What's caught your eye, or your ear, as it were?
Man, first of all, I have to say I'm so mad that, and I understand why podcasters and YouTubers don't post as much as they do because it's a lot of work. I have no doubt it's a lot of work, but man, like I'm dying for content. Like there's some people that haven't released stuff in a while, Bruce. I'm just itching for more content. I'm listening to podcasts like this one. The guys at Revzilla I find are so entertaining, both from the old crew that used to be there, the guys that are there now. I really enjoy their material, both their podcasts, their webcasts, everything that they're doing. The people at Fort 9, I think, do an amazing job in terms of exposing people to the different sides of motorcycling in an extremely creative way. I mean, I love their content, and it helps that they're Canadian too. Got to support those Canadian guys. Magazines. There's a great magazine. I can't think of it off the top of my head, the name of it, but it's basically like a touring magazine, and it's all about different rides that people can do or that you can do, and that has maps. And I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I love reading that magazine about all these different destinations and places you can go. What I do find I don't do a lot of is I don't watch a lot of reviews, about the brand new bike that's coming out. I'm not watching a lot of that again because I'm more interested in the lifestyle and the experiences of motorcycling than I am specifically about the tech of the whole thing. So really, if it's lifestyle based, I'm watching a lot of that. I binge watched all of Sons of Anarchy, so I got through all of that to kind of get my fill there a little bit. And those are my main sources, really.
Oh, interesting. And did you watch Long Way Up?
Oh yeah, binge watch those 3 series as well. Up, down, all around, all.
Yeah, I think an adventure bike is probably where you're headed. But, it's your journey, not mine. And tell me, and so...
Well, it's funny, I have a piece of paper beside me. I have a piece of paper sitting beside me that I wrote and I put on my bedside table that has, my wife had asked me, while everyone's going through the pandemic, kind of write down a list of things, that would make you really happy and experiences you want to do and things you want to try to kind of move on. And, it's open conversation stuff that her and I always have, like just to keep, future planning for ourselves and keeping ourselves motivated. And one of the very, very first thing I wrote was drive from coast to coast. And then a few lines down, I've got own a motorcycle. So she put a big question mark beside drive a motorcycle, own a motorcycle, and drive from coast to coast. She says, are these two things intertwined? Was her first question. And I said, well, actually, yeah, it is. I think it would be amazing to go coast to coast. And I would love for my daughter, my youngest, when she turns 16, and if she's able to get a license, to do that drive coast to coast with her. I think that would be an absolutely amazing experience, especially for her as what she'll be, a young girl to spend a summer or a few weeks doing. I think it'd be amazing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm encouraged that she just put a question mark there. So that, to me, that looks like hope. I'm just saying. Yeah, it's funny. Your daughter's come up a few times, and I'm super envious that this can become part of your relationship. I have a listener who lives in the Hamilton area, I think, and he's a lifelong rider, and his daughter has begun to ride, and they're at the point now where they not only ride together, but she's actually become quite a good mechanic and has just rebuilt her first engine, if I understand his Instagram posts accurately. And I just think, man, you're going to look back on that in 30 years and think you were a genius for letting that happen. It's just so, beautiful to be able to sort of bond over something passionate, whatever it is. And, for us, it's bikes, but, I'm really happy for you that that's part of your story. I wonder if you...
Yeah, I have two girls, and it's really nice to have my older one loves to ride horses. So, I spend a lot of time taking her back and forth to a barn so that she can ride. So that's where her and I have bonded, is on me experiencing that through her. I mean, I'm not, horses are great and all. I don't have the passion that she does for them, but it's something that she's able to do and enjoy and shares with me. And I was really looking for something with my younger one, who's a more analytical, kind of quiet. She's kind of which is funny, she's kind of more the kind of the mouse in the house kind of girl, but she's the one that's really into this type of thing, more the adventure sports side of things. And we found, and this is something that her and I are starting to bond more over. She was the first one I took on the back of my quad when I had bought that, and she is all over the adventure type thing. So it's really great to have something with her that we can really grow up together with.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Have you bumped into Jocelyn Snow in your online peregrinations? Does that name ring a bell?
Does not, no.
Yeah, so look her up immediately after we stop talking. She's an adventure rider sponsored by BMW, who's done all kinds of awesome things, and she's just tiny, and has developed all these techniques for riding, full size, R1250 GS type bikes. And she's an astonishing rider, and everything she does with complete giddy joy. You cannot watch a video of her doing her thing without, laughing out loud and grinning. I bet she would just blow your daughter's mind. I'll send you something after we're finished that you might like watching. Anyway, so that's really cool, and I wanted to call that out. Tell me about the online part of this. Have you been lurking in any forums, and what do you think about those environments?
Yeah, I've never really been into the forums. I mean, even from my aviation side, I've been kind of the person on the peripheral, looking in, checking into them every so often if there's something that's been of interest to me or a question that I've had, looking for an answer. But I've never participated on the online forum perspective. I don't know. I've just never found a real urge to do that. But it's again, as the winter drags on, it's only December right now. And I'm already, as soon as November 1st hits, I'm already tired of winter. So this is going to be a long winter. So I might have to resort to getting onto the forums and starting up some conversations with people and getting more engaged in that sense, just to get through the dreary months.
Yeah. It's kind of unavoidable. I mean, you have to be careful in all the ways you have to be careful on any forum. But it's, motorcycling's natural sense of community really sort of coalesces in that space. So let me know how that goes. So tell me about the journey ahead as you see it. I mean, we've bumped into this a few times in terms of, bike ownership and places you'd like to ride and crossing the country and that sort of thing. But what do you think you're going to be looking back on in 20 years?
The journey ahead is, I mean, for me, pretty clear. One of the big things, other than just riding from coast to coast across Canada, would be I want to try and cover a lot of the routes that I did on the plane on the ground. And when I say on the plane that I fly, low altitude type of short destinations. I mean, I've flown back and forth to Florida countless times. I've been all over Ohio and the Eastern Seaboard and really all over Canada in the planes. I want to retrace some of those destinations on two wheels so I can see what it's like from that perspective. I mean, I would be, hopefully my employer doesn't listen to this, but I mean, if I could switch into I have such a passion for this whole thing right now. If I could switch into a career in the motorcycle world, I think that would be amazing because, like I've said at the beginning, you only have one life to live, so you might as well live it. And, starting up a motorcycle business of some sort or working with a manufacturer, who knows what. I mean, I think that would be astonishing. So I could combine, kind of what feels like a real passion to me with a career. I think would be amazing. Will that happen? I don't know. I have a lifestyle that I like to be able to afford. So I don't know how much my entrepreneurial spirit will really kick off, but that's kind of those are kind of a couple of things that I definitely see myself doing and experiencing a lot of these things. Like I said, with my youngest, I think she would be a great co-pilot, a sidekick to have on the journey.
Yeah, no doubt. That's amazing. And is there, other than the cross Canada thing, which I think is a great idea, is there a dream ride? So the horizon, that I've set is 20 years. So you've got time in there to kind of ride in South America or Vietnam or, the Alps, or when you close your eyes and picture that perfect photo album, is there a dream destination?
Not so much a dream destination. I mean, I think I've always said there are so many great places to see in Canada. There's so many great places to see in the US that I don't feel like I would be unsatisfied if I didn't, go around the world on a motorcycle or have any big spots to go to. I would love to ride the Blue Ridge Mountains in the US, kind of almost copy the Appalachian Trail, but on a motorcycle. That sort of kind of route going north-south that way. I'd love to go out to California and, Yosemite and all those nice places and go and see all that. I just think there's so many destinations to see, on this continent that'll be more than enough to fill my desires.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The U.S. is just a motorcycling theme park. There's just so much variety there, and it's also just top notch. And I would like to do some of those same rides that you mentioned, although I'm more likely to be on pavement than you are. So this whole conversation was kind of kicked off by you sending me a note, and I thought it was kind of interesting that you wanted to express how you were feeling about having motorcycles in your life by turning to the written word. I mean, I thought it was a well written note, and you have a great command of the language, but you also seem to have things you wanted to kind of get off your chest. And I wonder if there's anything to that. Do you think you'll keep writing about riding?
I never thought of myself to be much of a writer until I really started doing this and found that it was allowing me to express myself in different ways. I think I could see myself continuing to write a little bit about it, but I think more on a personal level. And maybe that's because of my spouse's disengagement towards it, not necessarily her wanting to hear about my motorcycle antics or what I want to get up to with it. Sure, just not because she just doesn't have an interest in that particular side of things. So, in being able to express it, I could definitely see myself writing for myself. Almost, let's call it a journal of the adventures that I go through. And I think I'd be disappointed if I didn't catalog them in some way separate from, taking pictures or anything like that. But I could see myself writing a little bit. Yeah. But again, like I said, nothing, I don't have any visions of starting up a big blog or adventure blog or anything like that. I think it'll be more of a personal story that I'll write.
Right. And I guess your wife did not read the starting my journey email that you sent me.
Well, it's on my iPad. It's in my sent folder. So if she really wanted to see it, I'm not hiding it from her.
Yeah, it must be hard to love a motorcyclist, but I'm I'm sympathetic. And I guess sort of still on this subject of the future. I know as a pilot, you've probably got a lot of respect for the idea of continuous learning and kind of getting your hours in. I wonder if you have any more training in the cards. You talked about wanting to do an off-road course at some point soon. And I think you mentioned a track day, which I recommend highly. And of course, you'll have to, at some point, you'll want to get your unrestricted license, which is also involves some training. But is there anything else? Is there or does that kind of cover it? Do you have a kind of development plan?
I don't have a development plan because I don't know that there's quite as, at least maybe I'm just uninformed on the matter, but I don't believe there's quite as much in terms of courses to take here as there are perhaps down in the States. Taking a track day, like a learn to ride on the track thing would be awesome. I have no real excitement. Sport bikes don't really excite me that much, but I think to do it and have that experience, I think would be in a controlled environment. I think would be exhilarating. Again, if there are other courses and things like that are available beyond what's been mentioned, I'm all for hearing about them. I can see myself taking the intro course one more time because I have actually, and speaking about trying to get other people interested in the activity, one of my local coworkers wants to go on some of these rides, and we end up in Las Vegas and stuff like that. I say, well, first thing you got to do if you want to rent a bike is you got to get your license, and if you want to do your license, I'll take that course again with you. Why not? It could always be good to brush up on things. So I might do that again. Outside of that, I mean, I'm an open book for wanting to learn more things. So if you have any courses, or if any of your listeners have any courses in Canada that they can recommend, I'm all ears. I would love to learn every opportunity that I get.
Yeah. I think it's I mean, everybody kind of has their own path for this sort of thing, but I personally try to take something every year, or at the most every other year, just to kind of be humbled, which I generally am. So yeah, I'd be happy to share some suggestions with you, and I bet anybody else will too if they can find you on Instagram or elsewhere. We talked a bit about about your bucket list, so I won't press on that point any further, but I wonder if you have an idea for a post-COVID bust out. So that's a little sooner. What are you going to do when we're free again?
Well, again, because I have a bunch of team members that work down in the States, so I'll be heading down to the Carolinas. I'll be heading into Florida, probably a bit in Missouri, and doing some work lifts down there. So, I'm going to be pairing up those work lifts with my team, and with renting a bike at the beginning or the end of the work week, and doing that. So I'll be shooting myself out of a cannon to get south as quickly as possible, so I can hop on a bike. So maybe, if I'm able to travel soon, maybe it won't be April, maybe it'll be March when I can get myself back onto a bike.
Oh,
but that's the plan right now.
That would be awesome. So I assuming that this episode runs, true to pattern, I think you're probably going to have a large number of people who will be meeting you for the first time, listening to this conversation, and they are your new community, I guess, your new family. I wonder, while you've got everyone's attention, is there anything you want to say to us?
Really, just if you've got bikes, ride them. I've talked to so many people that own motorcycles, 1 bike, 2 bikes, 3 bikes, whatever number of bikes it is, and just don't ride them because time gets in the way. So one thing leads to another, and they just don't have time to ride their bikes. And the only thing I could say is if you own a motorcycle, if you have it, just get out there and go for the ride. If it's for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, just hop on and get out there, because until you do it again, if it's been, a bunch of months or a bunch of weeks since you've done it, you don't really remember quite what that feeling is like until you hop back on and go. And I'd say just take every opportunity you can to get out there and ride. I'm envious of people that do own their own gear, that they can just hop out and do it. So, that would be the biggest thing. Just go out, just go ride, have fun.
Yeah.
Get out and do it.
Yeah. It's terrible to think that there might be people out there who forget how lucky they are to be able to do this. But I think your reminder is a wise one. And I'll take that advice myself, although I'd like to think I don't miss an opportunity to throw a leg over, especially now. Boy, it's just been a blast talking to you. It's been fun to hear how it all begins again, kind of reliving it. And I love seeing the community energized by people as passionate about it as you are. So thanks for that too. But mostly thanks for making the time to talk to me today. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me relive my last few months there and getting me even more excited for the upcoming season. I really can't wait to get back out there and meet everyone. I may cross paths with you guys out on the road. So looking forward to giving the little wave and how do you do?
Well, when everything is sane again and you find yourself up in Creemore, as I suspect you probably will, you'll have to let me know, and I'd love to meet you in person.
Oh, hands down. Absolutely. I have family that owns a property in Shelburne, so I'm up that way quite often.
Oh, nice. Well, I'll look forward to that then. But in the meantime, have a great and short winter. Once you get back out there, ride safe, and thanks again.
My pleasure, Bruce. Thank you very much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Bye now. So if we imagine Neale Koumbiadis as the motorcycling equivalent of our 6-year-old selves knocking at the door, then I think he was pretty clear about how we should be grading our motorcycle lives. He said, if there's something you feel passionate about, then do it. If you've got bikes, then ride them. Well, I agree. He talked about being almost sobby after that first ride. Well, that still happens sometimes. And about the rush of surviving it and living to ride another day. Check. And about the obsession to try everything. Well, I'm still working on that. He talked about leaving all the baggage behind when the kickstand goes up, and about how much he loved the feeling of being part of a new family, or at least having instant friends, just because he was on 2 wheels. Well, clearly the fundamental wisdom here is simply that we shouldn't take this for granted. But reflecting on this conversation afterwards, I started to understand that the bar is a little higher than this. I think with time and experience, as we grow more immune to the hype around motorcycle culture, there's just a chance that we can become jaded. Well, I'm a long way from that myself, but it's not hard to see how you could get there. And what a tragedy that would be. The riders I admire the most are the ones who never did. By sheer coincidence, I received an email as I was writing this script from a listener named Steve in Washington State. Steve has been on 2 for more than 50 years, and he said, "I still experience something new every time I fire up one of my bikes." Well, that was a gift. And there's a guy, by the way, whose 6-year-old self is apparently along for the ride every time. A final footnote to this. Speaking with Neale kind of woke something else up in me that might just be the best way of all to relive those first magical days as a motorcyclist, and that was the urge to mentor. I tried as hard as I could in this conversation to keep my mouth shut because we were telling his story, but I frequently had and still have this irresistible urge to pass along what I've learned. This is pretty new for me. I haven't known that many beginning riders since I was one myself, and I never thought of myself as much of an authority on this subject. 90 minutes on the phone with Neale reframed that for me. Among the greatest joys that motorcycling gives us are these little fleeting tastes of mastery, and yet we often don't notice them, unless we're given the chance to look into the mirror of someone whose journey is just beginning. About his first big ride, Neale Koumbiadis said, "It really was amazing." Well, Neale, I'm happy to report that it still is. Well, thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com, and that's also a good way to reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, or if you just want to share something about your own journey. I'm always happy to reply. Emailing me directly at thismotorcyclelife@gmail.com works too. You can also find me lurking on Instagram, where I'm at thismotolife, and that's where you can find many of the people I've interviewed for this podcast, including one of the newest members of our family, Neale Koumbiadis. This episode's playlist recommendation is a long overdue return to Canada and a folk and country singer-songwriter named Donovan Woods. Donovan released a new album this fall called Without People, which I'm excited to hear. But this track comes from his first album after signing with a big Nashville label in 2016, and it's called The First Time. Donovan's lyrics are less certain about keeping that magic alive, so maybe it's a gentle warning. Either way, it's a great track. Buy it or stream it wherever you like to get your music, and in the meantime, keep staying alive out there.
When you're up all night, 'cause you want it so bad, but you know deep down, you're never gonna get it back. You can try all you like, you'll never get as high as the first time. When you dive so deep, you never wanna come up for air. And you would if you could, but you can't. Live your whole life down there. You know I'm right, and you know why. You'll never get as high as the first